Charlie. We're at 2:04. We're going to kick off our first of two regulatory workshops. We're being webcast right now, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Patrick DeRay, Chief of the Bureau of Automotive Repair. This first of the two regulatory workshops, just for those who weren't listening in or attending the advisory group meeting earlier this morning, this first hour is dedicated to the electronic authorization and documents. Again, an item that we've been working on for the better part of a year or more. A lot of input with two prior workshops has gone into the development of these regulations that are still in draft form. This is our third and hopefully final workshop on this topic before we move through the approval process and then publicly notice interested parties, the industry, presumably everyone here at this table, and anyone who's signed in at our workshops in the past, to let them know that we're going to pursue a formal, we're going to go through the formal process of adopting this regulation. That'll give everyone another opportunity to comment on these regs in a moment. Quiet, guys. I'm getting feedback here. It gives everyone another opportunity to comment on these regulations. Our second workshop will be on the STAR program and some modifications or changes that we are proposing to improve that program after having that program in place for a little over 3 years now. And that'll be at 3 p.m. Let's go quickly around the room. Before we do, we're being webcast, as I said, and there is an opportunity for someone listening in to pose a question or make a comment through the webcast. The email address for that is barmeeting@dca.ca.gov or gov. Barmeeting, all one word, @dca.ca.gov. Okay, quickly around the table for introductions.
Bill Thomas, Bureau of Automotive Repair.
Try to pass the mic around so
Dan Povey, Bureau of Automotive Repair.
Jack Moladonoff on behalf of several automotive repair associations.
Jaime Ramos, Bureau of Automotive Repair.
Monica Bauman, California New Car Dealers Association.
Bud Rice, Quality Tune-Up.
Jim Fogelquist, Bridgestone Retail Operations.
Dave Abraham, Sears Automotive.
Doug Marinero, Ride.ai.
Patrick Banta, independent shop owner, San Francisco.
Nikki Ayers, IAPA.
Jonathan Morrison, Auto Advisory Services.
John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition.
Carolyn Cocolette, Shopware Inc.
Davey Bald, H Mobile Services.
Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals Coalition of Motorists.
Ileana Butu, Legal Counsel for BAR.
Nina Tantrapal, BAR.
Sorry for the awkwardness of having to pass the mic around. We've got a few standing smaller mics for those to be able to comment, and that's really important because there are people who couldn't attend but want to participate. So if everyone can, as kind of a rule of order, when speaking, I'll call, I guess, who's next speaker, and then just introduce yourself so those listening in can know and associate a name with the voice. We're going to turn it over to Bill Thomas with our Enforcement Operations Branch, who's going to give an overview of where we've been with this regulation and where we currently stand.
Good afternoon again. So as Pat mentioned, this is our third and final workshop, prior to moving forward with the review process at the Department of Consumer Affairs and then on to filing with the Office of Administrative Law and going into the public comment period. In the Prior to workshops, we received a lot of suggestions and discussed and considered each of those at the Bureau. And our last workshop, and incorporated all of those that we deemed appropriate. In our last workshop, which was back in October of 2015, the final draft that came out of there, this change that's before you today, there's a few minor formatting changes and items such as within the text of the proposed regulation, wherever it said dealer, we added automotive repair in front of it to make it automotive repair dealer. So minor changes like that, nothing substantive to the intent and meaning of the passage. The two sections that received the most change since the last workshop that I want to call your attention to are what are labeled as 3354 additional authorization and 3355 non-returnable parts. For the most part, the rest of the sections remain as they were after the last workshop. So having said that, all of you had hopefully had opportunity to read this beforehand, and rather than go through it section by section, I think we just want to open it up to comments, and I think we can get through it much quicker because I think the comments are probably going to be focused on a few sections, and that'll be quicker. So with that, anybody?
Just a quick history on how we got to this regulation. We were originally asked by the industry if we could kind of bring ourselves into the 21st century by looking at the electronic age and maybe how to bring the Automotive Repair Act requirements as it relates to consumer disclosures relating to the estimate and authorization process and invoicing and keeping of records and documents. And we thought, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We do a lot of big transactions electronically nowadays, obviously with real estate and buying a home. You certainly can do that through the electronic processes available to you. But in the process of doing that, we also thought at some point that it would be good to kind of restructure the overall regulations so that they flowed better for anyone who'd asked, what are the requirements as an automotive repair dealer, or even a consumer who wanted to know what are my rights. You couldn't really, we certainly have the right at right document or brochure, but you couldn't really do that very easily with the regulation as it currently stands and hopefully will be in the past. So I thought at some point in the process of developing this, we were just pointing back to references or pointing to other sections in the regulation, and it just, rather than do that, we just said let's reformat it so it flows better to more closely track the automotive repair transaction from the initial intake with the estimate all the way through to the vehicle being repaired and the final invoice being issued. So that was the kind of the history of how we got here and why we're still working on this regulation, because that was a lot of work. The initial effort to call out the electronic processing or estimate and authorization process and those things, not too hard. It was all the reformatting and reorganizing all of the other sections. And along the way, we saw some things that could have been clarified better. So the intent was to make it even easier to understand for the ARDs and consumers out there. Okay.
Okay, so comment. Jonathan?
Fancy. All right. One notice, or one change that I did see notice that might be non-substantial, but I was just curious. The definition of estimate was changed to require that it's a written or electronic document provided to the customer that contains, and it used to say a written estimated price for labor and parts for a specific job. Now it says an itemized estimated price for parts and labor. Are you now looking on the estimate for each specific job, such as a lube oil filter a job? You'd want to have a breakdown of the estimated price for parts as well as a separate estimated price for labor? On the estimate, not the invoice.
3352.
Sorry, this is 3352A.
A, yeah. Yes. That was inserted in the latest round of edits through the informal review process through the department. So what I'll do is I'll make a note of that and we'll revisit it. And because I get your point, it seems to imply that we're saying now the estimate must itemize exactly what's going to be done, and it's the invoice that must be itemized, and the estimate just is a specific price for a specific job. So we'll go back and flesh out whether itemized is appropriate there.
Okay, great.
That was all? That's awesome.
Everything
All right, we're meeting adjourned. Thank you, Jonathan, for opening up the discussion. Any other? Bud?
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
So, Bud Rice, Quality Tune-Up Shops. So Bill, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if possible, and I understand that we've been battling this thing back and forth and that kind of stuff. So, for ease of the discussion, we all know write it right. We all know how to do manual invoices. It seems to be the electronic invoices that we seem to be struggling with, both in terms of what's the workflow, how does it work, what should we be asking our current vendors to maybe change and supply us with. So my request of you is, can you just walk us through what happens with an electronic invoice? In other words, customer drives on the lot, walks up to the desk. What happens next with an electronic invoice? We talk about the services that are going to be on, that we're going to be offering. How is the signature to be captured? What do they get back that they can now leave the shop? They leave their keys, they take something away with them. We then document the fact that we've now made a modification or a change to the original request. How is that documented? Can we do that through text messaging? Do they have to come back in and sign something different? How does that workflow? And then what do they leave with in the end? I mean, I understand that we're working through this document, but it would help if we knew from your perspective what that workflow looks like. And then we can see if the document matches up with that.
I don't know, let me start again here. I don't know that I can, I started the same way anyway, huh? I don't know that I can say how each transaction will specifically work, because it's going to vary depending upon the circumstances of the ARD and where they want to go with it and how they want to do it. Some estimates may be provided through an electronic link beforehand. Maybe there will be an email communication back and forth before, and that'll be provided. Or a service writer is going to walk out to the parking lot with the consumer and with a tablet and enter all the information, provide an estimate, and then click send and send it to their email address. It's going to vary from time to time. You specifically mentioned text, and I think we mentioned in the last meeting, we're not saying email, fax, and you'll notice that we deliberately left email, fax, text, whatever means of communication out, specific descriptions out, to leave it open for what the future may bring. Maybe it's through an app on the phone, and it's all done through the app. So I can't really describe each transaction other than to say that the basic principles remain the same. A customer drops their car off for service. are provided with an estimate. They approve the estimate, possibly through an electronic signature or through a signature of some sort. They have to still provide authorization. So that can be an electronic signature, maybe with their finger on the tablet, or whatever electronic identifier is provided to authorize that estimate, which is when it becomes a work order. Services are performed. If it's updated, that information has to be documented still in the same way. It's just whether it's on an electronic digital record or a printed piece of paper is what varies. And then when the services are complete, they have to be provided with an invoice that itemizes the repairs that were performed in a way they can understand. So it's more, the vision here and the goal here is to kind of not define exactly how every transaction will take place, other than the fact that you will give them an estimate, you will gain authorization, you will document a deviation from the estimate, and you will provide an invoice when they're done. And that's, I know that's not specific details, but that's the best I can answer.
That working? Great. Monica Bauman with CNCDA. I had some what might seem like nitpicks, but I think they could end up being important in the definition section. I think we've discussed a couple of these, or at least one of them. First thing that comes to mind is G for written. We'd previously discussed that it's limited currently to handwriting. And I believe that we had discussed at the last workshop that there might be a need to include some sort of printed word as well, whether people, I know we're looking towards the future, but I imagine there may still be some shops that use a typewriter or similar system that would not qualify as electronic within this definition, but would nonetheless be, by I think most of our understanding, to be written. So I'd like to see that that addition in there. Similarly with I for oral, it's currently listed as in person or telephonically. Looking towards the future, I can see that we would have dealers using teleconference systems or video conferencing systems, particularly video conference seems like it would be advantageous to a shop. So maybe expanding that definition. And then moving up on signature, the definition seems unnecessarily limited. The definition of electronic tracks the pretty commonly used definition of electronic in federal law when that deals with electronic signatures. So I'd ask that you maybe look at federal law as how it defines signature and consider adopting a similar approach.
I think that's a good point. I think I was just thinking back to some of the discussions that we were having when we were developing this regulation. I think one of the, if I recall right, I think one of the concerns when it came to signature was to make sure that, I think one of the biggest concerns is that, you know, the customer is authorizing that particular transaction, and that the signature cannot be reused on a different, you know, job that was not estimated for the customer. So yeah, it definitely, but it's definitely something to consider. And actually, I'm glad you brought it up because it was something that I was kind of wondering about. But if you have any other ideas about language, that would be good too. Yeah.
Happy to send those along.
Okay. Oh, did you?
Well, it's been a while. I've been looking at this, but I thought we built that into a more expanded approach, but maybe more so on the additional authorization, which to me, I don't know why we couldn't do the same on the initial. If someone says, here's my estimate through an email or some electronic means, why wouldn't the signature be something, why couldn't I accept or I authorize be enough through some return electronic? If we're allowing it on the additional authorization, I don't know why it wouldn't be the same on why the same arguments couldn't be made on the initial, but I think that's your point.
I'm concerned more for the the signature definition here specifically,
Okay.
though I'm all in favor of additional flexibility.
As long as those records are maintained and,
Yes.
and someone can show that transaction that I gave the estimate and then here's the authorization when whoever, our rep or someone asks, I think that.
Thanks.
And just to follow up on Monica's points, as it relates to either video conferencing or say what we would normally consider as a telephone call, but it's under like at my office we have VoIP, voice over internet protocol. That seems like it's more electronic under these definitions as opposed to telephonic, and that does make a difference when you get to the additional authorization provisions because you have certain documentation requirements for authorizations that are electronic versus those that are oral. So yeah, if there's a way to clarify what voice over internet protocol and video conferencing would be for those purposes, that'd be great. Yeah, because oral is verbal communication of information either in person or telephonically, right? And do you think telephonically is going to be using the telephone lines, whereas electronic would be using the internet? But it's that's kind of blurring.
I guess, it's hard to always just anticipate, like Bill was saying, we can't anticipate everything that might be out there in terms of electronic transactions, but there were a couple of people who reached out to me and mentioned that they do already have these electronic systems in place. If you've reviewed the reg and already, do you see any areas that are not covered by this regulation given the system that you have, or adequate for that?
Thank you. I'm Doug with Ride.ai. We're one of those vendors of those kinds of systems. Yes, I have two questions that
That's people on the web.
I can't speak loud enough to reach the web. How's that? Does that work? Great. The first question is, sometimes you refer to electronic authorization and sometimes you refer to signature. Authenticated that it's me, thank you, that's making that transaction, and I purchased my television set on Amazon. I don't have to sign anything at that point. I just want to get clarification specifically on the definition of underneath signature and authorization. It said, this is in the first section, 3352 E, authorization may mean either 1, the customer signature on the estimate, or 2, oral or electronic authorization documented in accordance with the applicable sections of these regulations. Correct, correct. And I think in the spirit, as you were suggesting before, of having more flexibility for different kinds of technologies. For example, there's two-factor authentication is a pretty common technology used when I'm trying to transfer money back and forth within my bank accounts. That does not require an electronic signature, but I just want to get clarification on that. That's great. Then the follow-on question is that seems to be the case throughout here, except for, and maybe I've misread it, except for in the case where you want to do an additional change to the, so this is additional authorization, this is 3354, where it says 3354 3C, that if consent for additional repairs is electronic, then you need to obtain the customer's signature or initials on the final invoice. So then, in that case, now I have to do electronic signature, as opposed to just providing some form of electronic authorization or consent. It does, but there are certainly circumstances from a consumer convenience standpoint where people want to grab the car after hours, the keys left in a key box or something like that. And so it's what's tremendous about it. I very much appreciate the effort on this. What's tremendous about this is that you're creating a great deal of convenience that's concurrent with the 21st century here, where people are able to do things asynchronously, and that should include being able to go drop off the car, pick up the car, pay for it, approve it, I would imagine. If I've given consent to the original estimate with just that authorization, why shouldn't I be able to give a similar consent for the additional? Right, because what you just said, that would be 3A, right? Where you say you basically have all that detail in there. So if you don't have all that detail, then a second option would be a signature that. Okay, that's helpful. That's a clarification. Thank you. I guess the final question is, from a consumer protection standpoint, the beauty of the electronic is you have. So my final question, I mean, I'm a technology guy, so I look at what we're accomplishing here with this, and one of the really wonderful things is that now that there's going to be this electronic audit trail, effectively, for all this communication that goes back and forth, it seems that the oral communication that would authorize this still leaves a gap there. And I'm just wondering if there's thought to provisioning, oral, or recordings or transcriptions of the oral things. That kind of technology is available. It may be viewed as more burdensome, but it's also out there as a possibility. You bet.
Trying to make
comply with that section of statute. So we're going to work together, and we're going to find a way to give you the ability to comply with that. But the Bureau's expectation is still that there will be an odometer at the time that the vehicle's dropped off, not something that the consumer emails in 3 weeks ahead of time when they're getting an estimate. So there's that concern. And then there's also the concern that while the expectation is that the majority of ARDs are going to go electronic, we still have to keep in the regulation provisions for the shops that want to still use a 3-part carbon estimate and invoice process. So just, but certainly we're noting everything you say here, and we're going to work to get it to where it works for both people, both groups.
Well, I'm back. This isn't pushback. This is actually, I forgot, I had 2 other small, what I think won't be controversial ideas, but it appears that under additional authorization, we don't allow for written additional authorization currently, which we have oral and we have electronic. And so being that some shops will not move, at least not tomorrow, we should also probably...
I guess the customers left the shop, but there may be the customer says, I'm waiting all day till the car gets
Right.
fixed.
Yes, so exactly. And similarly, that written authorization does not appear on page 6, which is what? D2 of... We do, exactly. The diverse state.
Tape it to his hand.
I've got several questions and comments. So let me start off with 3352FD, which is on page 2. So F2, any electronic signature? Yeah, it's number 2, F2. Yeah, it says any electronic signature executed by the customer shall include an unalterable date indicating when the signature was obtained by the automotive repair dealer. So now the signature has to include a date. My comment is, what if the invoice has a different date? And so the signature has a different date, and you have competing dates. And the reason I raise this is it could trigger a lien sale or something like that. Now, which date are you looking at? So what was the reason to have the date there? Is that necessary?
Actually, I'm sorry, Bill, do you want to?
Yeah, I was going to take that one.
Yeah.
The vision there was, and I'm going to speak bluntly and honestly for everybody in the room, we don't want a repair facility to have the ability to grab the signature one time and then use it wherever and whenever they need to. Short and sweet, that was our thought. That was the discussion, is that the signature must be captured for each transaction by itself and cannot be retained.
Well, if a signature is captured.
Yeah, so again, I understand the intent, but I'm worried about the competing dates with the original. So the car comes in on an original date, and then you have 2 dates. Maybe the customer authorizes on the second date. Could there be any confusion? It's more of a comment than anything else triggering a lien sale. I just wanted you to think about that. Let me jump to 3353E, which is the sublet disclosures. This is a substantive change, 3353A. Let me see, I'm sorry, it is E, 3353E. Yeah. It's the bottom of page, it starts at the bottom of page 6, right? Sublet, right? And it goes to page 7. The last sentence on page 7, it says, if requested by the customer, an automotive repair dealer shall disclose and record on the estimate the name and location of the facility at which the sublet repair will be done. Well, that's different than current law, right? I mean, you're changing current law. Because under current law, right now, under 3359, it only requires that upon request an ARD disclose the location at which the repair shop will be done without recording the information on the estimate. So it is a substantive change. Yeah, and I'm asking why? Why are we making a substantive change in sublets? Something.
You're saying that's different than the last version of these regs?
It is. The recording on the estimate.
It's a substantive change. It's not moving a section. If I know, Pat, you're saying moving a sections, and you're making a substantive change, and I just want to know why. No, you're recording on the estimate. That's.
Before, where did you take my car? I took it to Joe's. You fulfilled your obligation under law. Now it says you got to record it.
I guess what I'm saying, current law is fine. I mean, why can't we just leave it at current law? Why do?
If requested?
No, it's the recording on the estimate. Yeah.
We'll go back and look at it. We don't know.
One of these, but it might have been the
Okay.
replacement parts.
All right, we can move on.
If it's requested by the customer, you're just going to tell them.
Right. That's what occurs now. There hasn't been any issue as far as I know. Right. Yeah.
I don't know why. None of us can remember how we got it.
All right. Yeah. 3350. I'm going to go to 3354, which is the additional. Let's see, 33. 3354 4 or C. Let's see, what is it's on page 8. What is that? B. A4. It's on page 8. I just want to bring your attention to that. So there it says there that the final invoice provided to the customer shall contain a statement indicating whether the additional repairs were authorized orally or electronically. I guess my question is, what is this new statement? Isn't the statement above what you've added already with the acknowledgement? Is there an additional statement you're expecting? I was confused. Right, if it's in there on the acknowledgement, do you need another statement?
The important part of that section is the second sentence, that if it's authorized electronically, the method of electronic authorization shall also be recorded on the invoice. Now, we can certainly remove the first sentence, but that second sentence there is important because it tells us what was it, text, app, email, whatever, fax, and so forth. And that's where that information becomes required to be recorded on the invoice.
In addition, on 5, I noticed that you said this several times in the regs, that all documentation must be retained pursuant to section 9884 -11 of the Business and Professions Code and 3358, which is the 3 years. So you've got it listed there. I was wondering, why do we have to list it there if it's in 3358? Not only that, but if you go back to page 7, 3354, 2, any records created and obtained, you got to keep, again, 3358. You said it again. That's 2 times. And then it's in section on page 9. Again, you got to keep the documents for, under 3358. That's the 3rd time. And then you have it again on page 11, D. The automotive shall give the customer, and then it says you got to keep it, under 3358 again. I don't know why you need to keep on repeating it 5 times. I think. Yeah, I know. Isn't 3358 enough? I mean, you can clean up a lot. Okay, so anyway, that's just more of a drafting issue with me. It's really unnecessary. You don't need to have it listed 5 times. Okay, you got the point. 3355C. So this now says if a part specified in subsection B is replaced, the automotive repair dealer shall inform the customer orally and on both the work order and final invoice that said part is not returnable. This is a substantive change here. So the way I read it here is that this is a new requirement, and the shop now on core parts like a battery that's not returnable, you're going to have to requires the ARD to inform them on the work order that the part can't be returned. I'm just wondering, why was that inserted in there? Why are we making a substantive change with respect to this section?
I think what we were trying to do here is just to mirror the statute, so I think we'll just double check the statute on this. We're trying to mirror 984.10.
That section starts by saying upon request. That's the trigger of that entire section. You have to, so now you're saying they don't even, you've changed it's a substantive change, and I wanted you to at least take another look at it. I think we talked about it last time as well, and I don't know, it's still in there after we discussed, or at least I know I raised concerns about it. So anyway, I want to take a look at that one. That's 33, again, 3355C on replaced parts. 2 other comments. 3356C, which is parts kits. First, thank you for putting that in there, because I know a lot of ARDs do list itemized part kits, and they'll list it with the price and the part kit number and so forth. But many of these parts kits contain a lot of washers and those kinds of things. The second sentence is the troubling part. It says any unused components from the kit shall be offered to the customer. I don't think that's really necessary. If you're selling a part kit, that's what the customer's buying. They know what they're getting. A lot of these part kits have extra washers, extra thing. I don't think it's really necessary to return or even offer to return a washer or anything like that. I think it could create some other potential issues, and I don't think it's necessary. I know, Bill, you had mentioned at the last one, I remember you said, oh, well, it's the customer's washer. But they were really buying the kit, and I don't think it's necessary. So my recommendation would be to delete that second sentence.
Thank you, Jack. We'll take it under advisement.
Can we add that section 3358 here, though?
And one last comment is 3358 E. Yeah, the maintenance and the records. It has to do with E. That's a new section. So that says all records associated with the individual transaction, as specified in the section, shall have a unique identifier linking the records to that specific transaction. That is a new section. My only concern is it's very broad. It requires that all documents associated with the transaction. So, in other words, a warranty, it can include a document if someone wants to attach their warranty, or a coupon for further services, or any document at all. I think that's not the intent, I don't think. But anyway, I can see where someone can interpret it that way, if you know what I mean. Any kind of if they want a coupon for something like that. I mean, you're talking about everything they attach. I know that's not the intent, but that's the way it reads to me. And that was it.
Section. So this section is the items listed in A, invoices, B, estimates, C, work orders and or contracts for repairs, parts, and labor. So I don't think it would include coupons. Let's see, D is just open for inspection.
That's specified in this section.
So it's just A, B, and C. Yeah, I don't think it would include coupons and advertisements and things like that. I don't know. I think it's because we added either written or electronic form up there, and if you have emails, you're going to want something that links that email to that entire transaction. I don't know what a unique identifier is, if it's a number or a invoice number. Yeah. So the email would have would have that unique identifier, I would think. I think it was done because of the addition of the electronic. Certainly with texts and emails. But I think we limit it to the things or the documents that are required as part of this section. I'm glad Nina brought that to my attention. So I wouldn't take it to mean all the other items like coupons and such that you brought up.
Again, when you say that you come in and you request, because you talked about it during the complaint process, you do ask for the vendor invoices for parts, right? So would that require the unique identifier on it? I mean, that's the way I would read it.
So I see how you're reading that. I would put as specified in this section then after the word records. All records as specified in this section and associated with the individual transaction shall have a unique identifier. I think it's the fact that it comes after the word transaction maybe that is leading to some of the okay. Maybe move that as specified in this section up earlier in the sentence after the word records. I will look at it though, good point. Okay. That is not the intent. Okay.
Else?
This is on page 6. This is, I think, 3353D3B. Automotive repair dealers shall retain all records created to obtain the authorization from the customer for the initial estimate along with the work order. That created to obtain, that seems like it's a very, very broad category. I mean, the phone call, do you want records of the phone call? Again, we're talking about VoIP and video chats. Do you want that to be recorded if that's available and kept with the file? It might just be something to look at. That created to obtain the authorization seems to be very broad.
What Jack said. No, the intent there, and maybe we'll look at the verbiage and see if we can tweak it a little bit to make it provide a little more clarity. But the intent there is any email you send, any text you send, any other communication must be retained as a record with it to document the transaction. Okay. And we'll take it under advisement.
Returning back to the issue of signature, I'm looking at F2, going to the date issue again. Now that I've heard the purpose behind this, I'm wondering if date is really the better item to have for if we're trying to make sure that we have a uniquely identifiable signature that can't be reused. You may have a signature given 3 times in a day that would have the same date on it, for example, as opposed to, I think probably what we'd find is companies that offer these sort of services have a metadata that uniquely identifies each signature, and that would serve the exact same purpose as a date. So maybe some flexibility there. That might be something the industry can speak to better.
I'm good.
You're good? Should we take that under advisement? Any other questions? Any comments, concerns? I believe you all have Nina's email address. So, as we said, we will, I may have sounded a little facetious, sarcastic, whichever when I made that statement, but we certainly are going to go back and discuss every one of the comments raised today and really evaluate how we can make these regulations clear so that anybody can read through them and be able to conduct their business on a day-to-day basis without fear of not being in compliance with the reg because they're not sure what it says. So we certainly are going to seriously look at it, Jack, and make sure we get the best product possible out there. So with that, I think we're done for electronic estimates. Thank you.
Because we want to move on these and get them filed with our department for review and then ultimately sent to the Office of Administrative Law to begin the formal regulatory rulemaking process and give everyone another opportunity to comment on them. I'm going to ask that we, if you have any comments that you wanted to follow up on as a result of the discussion today, or even, after the meeting, let's give everyone 2 weeks to get to Nina. This will be our last workshop. I think we're so close to getting this to where we all want it to be, but there were some good comments that came up as a result. And there's, as I said, there'll be the formal process as well. But what's today? The 20. So it's 2 weeks from tomorrow, so we'll put it on a Friday, which is August 5th. So to Nina, any emails or written communications to her attention? 2 weeks and 1 day from today. You don't have to. We've taken pretty good notes here amongst the group here, but you're certainly entitled to, and don't want to discourage that. But we'll have to. I want to put a limit on it so we can get moving on this. Well, just getting to that stage is, the formal is 45 days initially, and then we get comments during that. We we have the ability to amend the regulations that we're proposing. And then if we do amend them, we would go out for an additional 15-day comment, and that process can go on and on and on until we're all squared away with it and we feel like this is as good as it gets type of thing. But just getting to that process is going to take several months just to get to the filing where everybody's got an official document to comment on. We got to go through. Yeah, I think so. I think that's doable. Yeah. Yeah, that's why the workshops are so important, because we get all of the comments hopefully addressed prior to publicizing them and doing that 45-day public comment period. There's a lot of back-end work too by Nina and everybody, and then legal counsel as well. We have to respond to every formal comment, so that's why we want to get them done now and hopefully address everybody's concerns, because that takes a long time. And as Ileana pointed out, you have a year from the time you file to finish that entire reg package. And to get it adopted.
After we were, right.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's going to take, well, for the whole, sorry, for the process that's remaining for the regulation, it probably will take at least a year. So right now, this is still in the informal review phase, and then we're at the Department of Consumer Affairs, and then we go into formal review at the Department of Consumer Affairs, and that can take several months. And then it's only until that's completed that we file officially our notice of the regulation publicly with the Office of Administrative Law. That kicks off the 45-day public comment period, and then any subsequent 15-day notice periods if we make changes to the text after that. But it's from that date of when we file the notice that we have the 1-year deadline. So getting there, it's going to still be a few months. So yeah.
Perfect. We're at 3:01. All right. Thank you for your participation, your assistance in getting us to where we are today. It's been a lot of work, especially on Nina. I appreciate all the work she's done, but also Bill and all the staff at the Bureau who've worked so hard to get this document as good a shape as it is in after many months of hard work. So we'll close this workshop, and for those who are not interested in the STAR program changes, goodbye, and thank you for your participation today. But you're all welcome to stick around for the next workshop, which we'll just move right into. If people need a break, the restrooms are outside. Garrett is going to maybe we'll just give a few minutes. We'll give about 3 minutes, just so people can quickly use the restroom, because Garrett does have a presentation we've got to load up on the system. We just concluded the first of the 2 regulatory workshops today on electronic authorizations and documents. Very good discussion. I understand for the people listening in via the webcast, there were some technical difficulties with a couple of the mics. And so hearing the comments from some of the participants who are sitting here with the Bureau at the workshop today was pretty challenging. Apologize for the technical difficulties there. We have a smaller group participating, it looks like, in this next workshop on the Gold Shield, the STAR program, and we are moving the tables a little closer together so people can squeeze in and make the one mic that we have easily transferable between the small group of us here, hopefully making it easier for everybody to listen in at home or at their office or wherever they're listening in. My name is Patrick DeRay, Chief of the Bureau of Automotive Repair. I'll facilitate the workshop. We've got a smaller group. Maybe we'll just quickly go around the room for quick introductions before we'll turn it over to Garrett Torgerson, who will give us a brief presentation on the changes that are going to be in this package.
Oh, okay. I'm I'm Nina Tantrafal from Bureau of Automotive Repair.
Ileana Butu, legal counsel for BAR.
Garrett Torgerson, Bar Engineering.
John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition.
Nikki Ayers, IAPA.
Bud Rice, Quality Tune-Up Shops.
Bill Thomas, Bureau of Automotive Repair.
Okay, thank you for the introductions. Smaller group for this one than the first one. Here we go with Garrett.
All right, so we had the presentation this morning talking about the station Smart Check Performance Report. As indicated in that report, we have some issues that we want to resolve with the STAR regulations, specifically those dealing with shortcomings in performance, really amongst some of the worst performing stations. And so I'll just jump right into it. Right now, there is regulations that have been handed out, draft regulations. There are some additions in the regulations that I'm going to be talking about here that we haven't had a chance to put in. We've already been receiving some comments, both internally and externally, and so those are going to be referenced, but they will not be in the regulations you're seeing. So the proposed STAR regulatory changes, basically we have some cleanup language from Gold Shield that was carryover from since the end of 2012 when that program ceased to exist. We add language now that includes the OIS program, which the OIS equipment which was added since then. The language for that was not included in the original STAR regs. Cleanup language talking about going from technician to inspector with the license changes. Language changed to reflect the suspension approach rather than invalidation for stations failing to meet the STAR performance measures. And lastly, changes regarding the performance measures themselves. And as we're going along here, is it okay if people just make comments as we're going along? It kind of, I think, is more timely. That's fine with me if people are comfortable doing that. All right, STAR's appeals and suspensions. And Bill, I wanted to make sure you feel comfortable. Obviously, we'll jump in at any point because some of the stuff is clearly under his bailiwick and some is more under mine. Either way, whatever we can offer is good. So moving towards suspension away from invalidation to better reflect the intent of AB 2289. The original STAR regulations dealt more with invalidating stations. Now we're looking at more a process of suspending them, which gives us more flexibility that I'll talk about in a little bit. Stations appealing suspensions maintain their STAR privileges only through the informal appeal process. What we're trying to do right now is some stations are elongating their stay in the STAR program even though they've clearly failed to meet the STAR performance measures, which is affecting the performance that we talked about earlier today with regard to the refill rates. We have a lot of stations, some of the stations, if you draw out the stations out of the performance measures that are actually failing to meet them, and then you look at how that improves our refill, there's a noticeable difference. So we're trying to address that. Chief or the chief's designee has more flexibility with regard to remedy of the appeal. When going through the informal process right now, stations will, upon appealing a STAR suspension, which will be, they will send a letter in and talk to the chief's designee about the appeals. We have a lot of those overturned right now. As Pat mentioned earlier on today, the chief's designees have been very thoughtful in their approach to reviewing the appeals. Stations suspended will have their directed vehicle inspection privileges automatically reinstated at the conclusion of the suspension period. Going with an invalidation approach, stations would have to reapply to the STAR program after their time was up. Since we're only going with a suspension approach now, that would actually be changed so that once their time was served, their privileges would be reinstated immediately at that point without having to go through the application process. Performance measures changes. This is a big one right here. One of the original loopholes that we actually wrote into the STAR regulations, we allowed brand new stations to come into the program with brand new technicians as a means to allow people to get into the program more easily initially. What we're finding is that a lot of these stations that don't have any history built, either they don't have an FPR score either for the station or the technician, a lot of those guys when they're coming in are dramatically hurting our performance in the program. And so we'll see specifically some of the behavior, like a station will get shut down for performance. They open up the station under some other person's name. They'll hire some brand new green techs to come into the program with nothing more than the intention to actually continue doing low quality work just under a different banner. And so what we're changing this to do now is that somebody's got to have a score that they built up, a positive score that they're willing to put at jeopardy before they do low quality work, before they immediately start just trying to get vehicles through the program willy-nilly. And if we do that, there's a noticeable change immediately on the FPR scores, the overall refill performance of the program. So somebody, either a station can come into the program brand new, but they've got to hire experienced techs with a decent score. A brand new tech can come into the program, but they got to be going to a station that has a reputable score immediately. If you're hiring a tech into your station and you're already an existing STAR station, if the station does not have a score, you must hire in a tech with a good score, and the vice versa as well. So if you have a technician who has no score, wants to hire into a STAR station, he can do that, but the station has to have a decent score. Do you see how that works? And so by that, we're ensuring that somebody, if you're coming in with good intentions, you're going to do just fine. If you're coming in just to try to turn the crank over, bring a station into the program that shouldn't be there, you have no intention of playing honest work, then that's going to be what we're trying to stop with this change. On the short-term performance measures, one of them is the similar vehicle failure rate. What this looks at is our stations basically failing vehicles at a rate that seems reasonable for looking at similar vehicles. And the threshold before was actually very lenient. They had to have a failure rate at or above 75% of average for similar vehicles, which means that they could be below average and still pass this measure. We've actually made that more lenient now. And the reason why we made that more lenient, actually the 75 percentile was perfectly fair for the vast majority of stations. Our concern, honestly, right here was a smaller group of stations for which they have a relatively stable clientele that they've been doing actually excellent work with. And so when they have good relationships going, we've seen some of these stations have excellent FPR scores, and their customers, when they're coming back in, actually have very low refailure rates coming back into that station in the next cycle. And so we actually made this looser a little bit here so we wouldn't be kicking out what we believe to be very solid operators. And so that's where we've gone on that. We're looking at 3 new short-term performance measures. One of them is on the OIS, using the mod check inspection using the wrong equipment platform. Lately we've been issuing, and they've gotten a lot of publicity, citations for performing an OIS inspection on a bar 97 or vice versa. What we're trying to do here is actually just move it into the realm of the STAR performance measures. Then we could take some of the heat off, all except the worst, most egregious offenders with regard to the citation process. So that was what we were thinking at this point. Another one of them is manual entries of VIN during an OIS inspection. When performing an OIS inspection, the inspector is supposed to scan both the DMV documentation of the vehicle coming in. They're also supposed to scan the VIN off the vehicle. What has happening in many cases is that people are just getting lazy and they're not scanning both, or in some cases, worse yet, the vehicle is never there to begin with. And so we want to actually require that the vehicle VIN be scanned as part of this process. If it's not scanned, it's going to be counting against on the short-term performance measures. Again, these will be compared on a vehicle-by-vehicle basis, and your numbers just can't be above average. It'll be above 125% of average for similar vehicles. So you can still be, you're going to have some vehicles show up for which you can't scan. Occasionally your equipment may have broken on a particular test, you got to get it replaced. Some of that will be allowed, but then your rate of not performing the manual VIN or the scanning the VIN entry during an inspection off a vehicle can't be substantially above average for similar vehicles. Third performance measure, performing excessively fast inspections. What we're looking at here, on many OIS inspections, you'll see the average inspection time and the time measured from the start of one inspection to the start of the following inspection. Basically, what we're seeing in some cases is that there are certain bad operators who perform inspections exceptionally fast. And really, we'll see with a lot of OIS inspections, inspection times in the 8, 9, 10 minutes from start to start. We'll see some operators coming in about 3 minutes. And when we see these 3-minute times, usually there's a myriad of other things that are showing up in our performance measures that we don't display as part of STAR, but they're showing up there as well. These guys are essentially just turning the crank extremely fast. In many cases, they're doing it between 1 and 3 in the morning. I mean, a variety of factors that are bad, but we just want to put a STAR performance measure up here. If their intent is to perform inspections in 3 minutes, we don't want to have them participating in our program because their goals are not in alignment with what we're trying to achieve with air quality. As with the other STAR performance measures, these measures will be based upon industry norms. So people are going to be compared to each other. And that's the way it has been. That's the way we intend to keep it. Other proposed changes. Reapplication after denial for short-term performance measures will not be considered until the next calendar quarter. One of the things we see is that, and this doesn't happen all that often, but when someone applies to the program, they get denied for short-term performance measures. Their similar vehicle failure rate was extremely low, and they had gear shift problems and stuff like this. Within a calendar quarter, nothing can change for that station. Until new scores are published, nothing can change. And yet we'll get stations sending 3, 4, 5 more applications in the same quarter, even though we've denied them. And each of these times, we're taking the time out of our schedule to respond to each one of them. And so what this change essentially says is that once you've applied once, we've denied you once for short-term performance measures, then we're not going to respond again until the next calendar quarter. Now, contrast that to like an FPR, where you can apply with a certain technician in your system for an FPR, and you get denied because of that technician, but then you can remove that technician from your system and apply again. That would actually be a change, and we would consider that. Allow low FPR technicians to perform repairs at STAR stations. The way the existing regulations are worded, if you are a STAR station, you cannot have a low FPR technician at your station in your analyzer, and he may not do, even if he's not in the analyzer, he may not do repairs at that station. And we're actually loosening this up. The STAR program is an inspection-based program, and so as a result, you can't have him in your analyzer doing inspections at that station. But if you have a technician with a low FPR, since it is an inspection-based performance measure, they can now, with the new regulations as we have them proposed, they may perform repairs at that station. Last one on this page, 30-day calibration on at least one bar EIS required for STAR stations. One of the things required for STAR stations is that they perform inspections on all vehicles. They're capable of performing inspections on all vehicles. Well, it's awful hard for bar to, we'll see a number of stations that they have not inspected a single bar 97 type inspection. They haven't performed one in the last 6 months. And it's hard for us to say if we visit a station and say, you know what, you're intentionally turning away motorists because we don't know actually who's been visiting them. If they have a station that's in some affluent area of Granite Bay, they may not have many older vehicles coming in to inspect on the bar 97. At the same time, their equipment should be up and operational to inspect those vehicles should they come in. With many of these stations, however, they have not performed a calibration on the bar 97 in months, and in fact, in some cases, as you will see on IATN with complaints, is that the equipment from the bar 97 is actually pushed off into a corner and hasn't operated in months. And there's something wrong with it. And so that's clearly not the intent of this. So one of the things we want to require in those new regulations is that at least once every 30 days, if you're operating in STAR, you've performed a calibration, a passing calibration on your system to verify that it is in fact working so that it's not unfair to the other operators that are doing this as well. And that is it for the proposed regulations. But
thank you, Garrett. Bud Rice, Quality Tune-Up. Two quick questions. The first one is,
I was looking at your presentation earlier today, and I was looking at the bars and your analysis of poor performing stations had high percentages on your graph. And that was the first time I'd seen your chart, so I haven't had an opportunity to kind of digest it a little bit. But while I was having lunch, I was going, man, those numbers just look awful, as I'm looking at your chart. Is it, and I'm just going to ask this, is it possible it's the cars? Is it possible it's the cars that have a problem and their failure rates are higher and they're coming back on? There may be a problem at the stations, but could it also be the cars that are an issue? Okay, so that's my first one. My second one was, you were talking about STAR stations need to hire techs with FPR ratings that match up so that they can maintain their STAR certification, and they can't hire lower ones. My sense is when you were saying that, it's almost like you believe that there is a surplus of these techs running around, and I'm telling you from an operator, it is difficult to find these guys, and they're not coming out of the schools in the numbers we're used to seeing back in the day, or on the street in numbers we used to see back in the day. These guys are hard to find. Those are my two comments, but thank you.
Okay, so we'll start with the second one, and then I'll have you remind me what the first one was, because I can't keep that much in my brain. But so the second one, with regard to the text coming out, I mean, we'll go a little bit economic on this thing right now. If there's a true shortage of techs, what are we going to see from supply and demand? The price goes up, so people are going to be getting paid more. And we do actually see, from what we see on advertisements within the program, for instance, on Craigslist, that technicians with good scores do command at least higher advertising wages than do the other ones. Presumably, though, this is a free market. That one should solve itself. So if there's truly a shortage and there's a need, wages will go up, and that'll satisfy that. So do you see what I'm saying? And I understand you're saying that you're running a station, you have a certain amount and you want to pay, and you can't find somebody to work at that amount you want to pay. Is that fair?
Number of those guys may not match the number of stations that are looking.
Yeah, but so balance that against what we're trying to do right now is we have some of these stations that are coming in, and basically it's an organized element. These guys have affiliations that we're trying to unravel through schools and through operators that are these puppet owners kind of coming in from behind. That when one station closes down, the next station opens up, and on day 2, the station's volume, they're doing 50 inspections a day. How does a brand new business do that? Well, they're not a brand new business, actually. They have this organized pipeline through which they're funneling vehicles to these stations, and so this is just, we're playing whack-a-mole. And so what we're doing is we're trying to stop the whack-a-mole. And so you're not competing with the technicians that we're trying to stop with this process. If you're running an honest business, that's not your market. That's not who you're looking for. But we're trying to stop those guys, so the guys who are honest operators aren't getting, essentially, if you're running an honest station, they're taking some of your lunch. And that's what we're trying to stop with this change. So, and what was the first one?
Maybe the problem's the cars.
Okay, so, with the STAR performance measures, what we do is everything is evaluated against similar vehicles. And so if you're inspecting 1976 Chevettes, you're being compared to other 1976 Chevettes. One of the things we can't talk about, we have a bunch of performance measures we look. We're not just looking at STAR performance measures, and that's all we have access to. We're also looking at a whole bunch of other performance measures, and I can tell you that the stations that are showing up with the worst scores, we have a whole bunch of stuff we're looking at on them, and enforcement is actively working on these stations. But this is one more way to keep them from getting to the privilege of getting these directed vehicles, is by making sure that their scores are good. So it's not that we're just looking at the FPR scores in that bottom band and we're saying, look, they have a low FPR score. There's a whole bunch of other stuff we're looking at that corroborates what we're seeing with those scores. And so that's not my concern, is that we're just looking at vehicles. We've tried to isolate that. We've tried to make sure that in fact is not what's happening. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that.
With regard to the STAR appeals process and changes, the one that jumped out at me here is that the part of the proposal is to give the chief's designee more flexibility with regard to the remedy of appeal. Can you kind of go over the current process of appeal, which I think I understand, but then what you're envisioning changing, including that particular provision there?
Yeah, so what the flexibility we're really talking about there is, right now, if somebody has run afoul of the performance measures, basically the prescription based upon the regulations is that that station will lose its privileges for a year.
Sorry, just an example where they test on the wrong machine. Yeah, that was a common one. I don't know if it occurs, but let's just follow that one right now. And I understand they can appeal. There's a process, and part of the designee, they had to send something something in writing to the designee, right? And my experience is that some of these folks were just not as articulate. They couldn't write very well, language barriers and all that. And they were at a disadvantage, but they couldn't talk to the designee. They had to submit something in writing, as I understand it. Is that what? And here you're talking about more flexibility. So I just wanted to understand the current process, and it sounds like you want to improve it, but I just don't understand how you're trying to improve it by more flexibility.
Yeah, so I tell you what, I'm going to have Bill answer that one.
So currently, as it's defined in 3392.6.1, we provide a notice of invalidation, and it does say invalidation in the reg. However, in the statute in 44014.5, it only talks suspension. So that's one of the changes, is we're switching to suspension, which is really more appropriate with what we want to do here. Invalidation implies permanent. Suspension is just a temporary time out of the STAR program. They are required to appeal within 5 days from receipt of the notice, which it's not 5 days from service, which would be from when we mail. It's actually from receipt. And so they appeal, and with the STAR process, they must, the only option initially is to request an informal appeal before the chief's designee. They can't go straight to an administrative review. And then that matter is heard. We provide notice of the results. And if it's unfavorable, they have 30 days to request an administrative hearing. Currently, the regs do not provide for the designee. So the staff that does the STAR invalidation process simply provides a notice that says the Bureau intends to invalidate in the future. It'll be suspend your STAR certification. And the designee does not have the ability currently in regulation to modify that to say 15 days or 30-day suspension or invalidation. There's no provision there. Even though the statute in 44014.5 sub D2C, it specifically says the chief's designee may affirm, dismiss, or take any other appropriate action in regards to the invalidation. So the statute specifically, the legislature specifically provided the designee the opportunity to put out a decision in the informal process that would be fair and reasonable, if you will, take appropriate. And so I know, as for example, and it's public record, so I can speak to it, shops that get a single citation, no other disciplinary history, good FPR scores, good short-term scores, pass STAR and every other thing, their only crime, if you will, is the receipt of a citation, and they haven't had any other ones in recent years. Those currently on like I think Bud said earlier today, in theory, they're out for a year, the way the reg currently reads, because we can't change it. Now, what we've been doing is through the Attorney General's, once they ask for an administrative review, we've been stipulating, the department has been stipulating to a temporary invalidation of typically a period of 45, 60 days, sometimes as low as 30 days, depending on their history. And many of the stations are taking that. That's a fair and reasonable, okay, you got a citation. That is grounds for being out of the STAR program for a period. They're not one of the bad players that have bad score across the board. They're all red on the STAR page. Those, no, we're not settling with those. It's the ones that just had this one. So this proposed change would give the designee the ability to issue that decision.
Uphold or dismiss?
It's uphold or dismiss currently. And so that's the big goal here, is to get that in place. And I think that benefits all of us. Yeah. And the statute did provide.
I think it's a benefit to all of us. Yeah,
I agree. Was there, no, that was just that one clarification, correct? Okay.
I'm sorry. We were all supposed to get, we were all supposed to renew our STAR by the end of June. And I haven't gotten my new STAR renewal, although I'm still current on the machine. Has that gone out? Everybody I've talked to hasn't received anything new yet.
Yeah, test and repair stations that are in STAR are under contract to provide repair assistance services. I was under the impression those had gone out. I'll follow up with the program manager on that. Okay. Other comments, questions? Anything from the webcast? Besides, we can't hear you, the mics are broken. And we got a lot of those on the last workshop. Yeah, we know. Yeah, some lightening up of the, it's not an all or nothing type of thing. Yeah. I think we saw the benefit in that as well. And that was the intention, obviously, of the statute. And a lot of this, frankly, was carryover from the old Gold Shield program. I kind of referenced it earlier by mistake. But, yeah, we had invalidation as the term of art under that program. And it wasn't all or nothing. But this program envisioned something that could be a little softer and more reasonable approach to, I guess, days down from inspecting directed vehicles. A suspension of sorts. Okay. Any other comments, questions, concerns? We'll, if you have comments or questions or more comments, I guess, I'd like to put a time frame on that. Also, two weeks and a day, if we can have those to Nina by August 5th. August 5th is a Friday? Yeah, August 5th. Any emails or written comments should go to her attention by August 5th. Thank you. All right, we'll adjourn for the day. We'll see everybody at the next advisory group meeting on October 20th, and hope to have a couple of workshops also in conjunction with that meeting. Thank you.